our method has a forensic approach. So for the we're gonna have the DNA isolation with a forensic approach, and the real-time PCR will be is designed to have short DNA targets with a highly repetitive sequence with a Tachman-based probe. So as I said in the morning, the method of ours was actually published very recently in March 2021. So you can also look for the details if you're interested. So the paper was available online right now. So let's start with the DNA isolation part. So as I said, there are four very important, I say, pillars that we have to be careful during DNA isolation. So the first one is the homogenization of the sample. You have to use the liquid nitrogen for the grinding. And the lysis buffers of ours contains SDS, and we also beside lysis buffer, we add extra SDS and DTT inside the lysis process. And we do phenol chloroform isoamyl alcohol extraction because we tried, and if we don't do this extraction, the DNA isolation is not good enough. And finally, and I think the most important part is we have to do ethanol precipitation of the DNA, because if we use a spin column, it holds some of the DNA inside. And since we have very low concentration of DNA in high processed foods, almost all of it is stuck in the spin column. So never load your DNA on a spin column. So you have to use the ethanol precipitation. So I should tell you here that actually in the video, we have a small change. It was kind of like very quick, so we couldn't arrange it. So in the video, ethanol precipitation is before phenol chloroform isoamyl alcohol extraction, but actually this is the correct order. And so for the real-time PCR reaction, I should tell you that the region, the porcine DNA region that we selected is an non-coding intron region, and it has a really high copy number. So that means it's a very repetitive DNA, and there is no homologies between bovine, of course, so this species specific. And the PCR product that we amplify is 95 base pair long. So it's a short DNA with a Tachman-based probe design. So materials, yes.
I have one, announcement for the participant, because as it is a practical demonstration session, so please feel free to ask question in between if you have. Just raise your hand, so we'll show you a mic so you can ask directly a question if you have any. Please continue.
Thank you. So the materials that we will use are ethanol or isopropanol. We generally use ethanol for washing parts of DNA, washing protocols of DNA, and isopropanol for the extraction, actually. Just let me, it's the precipitation, I couldn't find the word, sorry. So we actually tried both ethanol and isopropanol precipitations. Isopropanol generally works better for the DNA precipitation, but when it comes to before you, after you centrifuge your DNA, you just wash it once, without getting the pellet out. So it's just like a little 100 microliter liquid. You just wash it out to get rid of the remainings. So that part can be done by ethanol. But if you're gonna isolate, precipitate the DNA, we agree to use isopropanol. So of course there is water and microcentrifuge tubes. The lysis buffer is indicated in the paper, so you can check it from there. And additional to lysis buffer, we add 20% SDS and 1 molar DTT. And we use commercial protein SK since we cannot make it ourselves. And we use phenol chloroform isoamyl alcohol mixture which is 25 to 24 to 1 in ratio. So of course, there are some cautions before the method. So you always have to wear gloves. It both protects you from the samples. And the main idea is to protect the sample from us, because there will be a DNA contamination from us, whatever we, because like in the laboratory, you're going to work with various samples and you will contaminate them all. So also buffers can be irritating. They're having like very irritating salts and like DTTs, you know, like they're also hazardous chemicals. So like all these buffers have to be used in caution. And all the tips and all the tubes have to be DNAs, RNAs, and pyrogen free. So this is the cautions that we have to take in mind, keep in mind. And so to start with, we normally, like, you know, for the DNA isolation, you start with generally 200 milligrams of sample. But in this case, we try to keep it higher than this amount. Like we generally take around 500, 600 milligrams of sample, because we know that there will be too little DNA, too low concentrations of DNA inside. So the more is the better. So homogenization process led us to get more DNA. And we add liquid nitrogen on it and grind it with mortar and pestle. And if we need more liquid nitrogen, and you will see in the video, you have to grind the sample until it becomes like a dust, or like a powder. And of course, like at the beginning, you don't weight your sample, but after you grind it, you take around like 500 milligrams of sample into a microcentrifuge tube. And then we add the lysis buffer, 20% SDS, 1 molar DTT, and proteinase K into the sample tube. We vortex them and incubate them in 65 degrees for at least an hour. If you have time and if you start this reaction like in the afternoon, you can actually keep it overnight in 65 degrees. It's actually much better, but 1 hour is also enough. The incubator has to be shaking for the sample to get all the buffers inside. And after this step, we add the equal volume of phenol chloroform isomal alcohol mixture, vortex them, and centrifuge for a little spin. And because of this phenol chloroform isomal alcohol separation, there will be layers formed inside the tube. So you will see the top layer as the water layer, down layer will be the phenol layer. So we transfer the upper phase to a clean tube, and we add equal volume of cold isopropanol. It has to be absolute. And the isopropanol you use here is also important. It has to be chilled, of course, but it has to be PCR grade. Like it has to be absolute. Like you have to make sure that it can be used for PCR reactions or DNA isolation systems, because sometimes some like technical ethanols or technical isopropanols sometimes give absorbance into 60 nanometer. So at the end of your DNA isolation, you're going to see like something is coming, but it's not DNA. It's probably either isopropanol or sometimes it's phenol though. But that's why you have to make sure that everything, like your pipettes, your tubes, tips, everything is DNA, RNA, pyrogen free, and your isopropanol is absolute and suitable for DNA reactions. After addition of cold isopropanol, we incubate it at minus 20 degrees for at least 1 hour. So again, if you have time, you can leave it there overnight or even like longer time. So for example, if it's the weekend, you can just keep it at minus 20 degrees, so nothing will happen to the DNA. So after this, to collect the DNA, which is precipitated inside isopropanol, we centrifuge it for 10 minutes at the maximum RPM. And we dump the supernatant, wash the pellet with 70% isopropanol or ethanol, it's depending on what you have. And then we centrifuge it again and dump the supernatant and dry the pellet. So this pellet is containing our DNA. And after it's completely dried, if it's not completely dried, as I said, isopropanol or ethanol remained inside our DNA, will give some peaks in spectrophotometer. So we're not gonna make sure how much DNA we have at the end. And also it will block the PCR reaction afterwards. So we have to make sure that the pellet is completely dry, and then we will dissolve it in 100 microliters of water and measure, as I said, the absorbance at 260 nanometers in a nanophotometer. So it will give us an idea about how much DNA we have, the concentration in nanograms per microliter. So if we come to RT-PCR reaction, so basically we use actually a Roche master mix, RT-PCR master mix, and the primers and probe sequences are given in our paper. You can check from there. And we use actually 150 nanomolar of forward and reverse primers and 75 nanomolar of probe. And you can see the reaction here. These are our stock solutions. And this is the final concentration. So I would like to tell you that for normally, like if we have high concentrations of DNA for regular samples, because actually you can use this like DNA extraction and PCR for meat samples too. If you are using them for regular food samples, their concentration will be really high, like hundreds of nanograms per microliter. So you have to dilute them to 50, and your final concentration, if you take 5 microliter from this 50 nanogram per milliliter, you're gonna end up with around 200 nanograms of DNA. But if you are dealing with samples like gelatin itself or gelatin containing foods, like high processed foods, probably your concentration will be very low, even if you have like something 70, 80 nanograms per microliter. It's not really good enough because, as I said in the morning, in my presentation in the morning, they are not really pure. So that's why this is not the exact concentration. So I recommend to use the DNA after DNA isolation directly without dilution. Just take 5 microliter and put it into your PCR reaction. And this is the PCR reaction protocol. So our annealing temperature is 60 degrees, and it is better to have an extension at 72. So let's move to the our video. I think you're not gonna hear the sound, but it's just the music. So this is actually from our international training. We had some guests all over the world by the help of SMIC. So all the people who want to come and have an actual training, they were here for, I guess, for 2 days. As I remember, it was in 2019. So we had a very good experience with them. We had this shooting when they were actually having the training inside, between the waiting times. So these are the food types that you can use with this method. You can see like there are cakes, chips, biscuits, jelly beans, the gelatin plates, how do we call them? I don't remember. There's chocolate filled with something inside. So like all these products are very highly processed. So in this one, we're going to use the jelly beans. So these are our technical personnel. So the DNA isolation starts with addition of liquid nitrogen, and we start grinding in a mortar and pestle. It's going to freeze immediately. So you have to crack it a little bit and then crush it. So now you can see it's kind of like crystallized, but not powdered still. So you have to add more liquid nitrogen. So at the end, you will see like it's going to be like really powderized. So you see like it's almost nothing left. Physically, we break down all the sample and we take out all the available DNAs and other molecules too. So we take some sample with a spatula into a clean tube. We generally use the 2 milliliter microcentrifuge tubes. And of course, you have to perform your analysis with 2 different DNA isolations to make sure it is because of the ISO standards. So now he will move to the addition of lysis buffer. So here you have to make sure that the tip of the micropipette doesn't touch the tube. If it touches, you have to change it because you will make a contamination. So this molecular laboratory work is really sensitive. You have to watch every step that you do. So now he will add SDS, it's 20% SDS. Actually, the lysis buffer contains a little concentration of SDS, but it's not enough for the lysis process. So we add SDS also after the addition of lysis buffer. So he is adding proteinase K. If you have a sample like gelatin, since it's mostly containing protein contents, incubating will help it because proteinase K will crack down all the proteins if it's incubated more in a longer time. He also added the DTT, and now he is vortexing them before incubation step. So incubation is at least for an hour. As I said, it's better to extend the time in 65 degrees and shaking. So there's a mistake here, as I said during my presentation. He's adding right now called ethanol, but actually this is the step after phenol chloroform extraction. So there had been a mistake here. So now he's adding the phenol chloroform. Here, actually, in the purpose of showing you the bottles, we use them from the bottles, but it's better to have because you see like the pipette is going inside the bottle and coming out, so it's kind of causing contamination. So if you just put it into another Falcon tube and use it from there, it's much better. So right now he added the phenol chloroform isoamyl alcohol, and then he centrifuged them for some time, like 10 minutes, and you can see the layers formation. Let me show you here again. You can see the layers. Actually, like where he holds his hand is the bottom of the layer, and he he has to be very careful while he's taking the top layer, because we don't want the bottom layer. It will gonna contaminate our DNA because it contains phenol, and our DNA will be affected in PCR because of the contamination of phenol. So if you can take the top part, and you see like there's a little more water part, like the top part, but you want to take it, but it is mixing with the bottom, so don't do it. Like just take whatever you can. So he put it into a clean room, and then actually we do the ethanol extraction, and we do the centrifuges and drying the pellet. So now he had the PCR reactions. So before we put them into the instrument, we spin them down to make sure all the liquid is down at the bottom and there are no bubbles. Check for the bubbles. Place the tubes into the PCR instrument and start the reaction. So this is basically what we had. This is all from me. If you have any questions, I would like to answer. As I said, the recipes and the primer prop sequences, you can find them from our paper in food contaminants and additives, part A.
So, any question? I think the procedure is quite clear and you nicely elaborated
Thank you.
as well as through video as well, because that is not my relevant work, but even though it's quite clear to me as well that how you can check the DNA. So, uh, do you have any question? So I think it's quite clear, and these things, I mean, the whole video would be available to the participants as well. So maybe they have any question, we will let you know. So once
Okay.
again, Dr. Isra, thank you very much for your kind support and cooperation throughout the course. So once again, thank you very much.
Thank you to all. See you
Welcome.
later.
Bye. I hope that you listen our rounds of applause. I hope that it would be clear to you. Anyway, so the next one would be from Malaysia. मैंने बताया था ना इसमें कौन है देखिए क्या नाम है नूरतनी नूर I think from Malaysia, Dr. Nuratni. Oh yes, she is there. क्या नाम है जुनैद डॉक्टर नुरैतनी को होस्ट बना दें प्लीज.
ओके सर.
इनकी वीडियो आ गई है काफी क्या है थर्ड वाली थी.
यस सर, इनको बना दिया पोस्ट.
So, Dr. Nuratni, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear finally.
That's good. So the floor is yours now. So if you want to elaborate something first, followed by your video, so it's up to you. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you so much for the opportunity given to me. So I will share my presentation first and then followed by the video. Okay, my title today was MS2627. detections of porcine DNA, test method, food and food product. Actually, this one is a Malaysian standard, which is already patented by Department of Standards Malaysia. This standards was a collaboration between a few private sector and government agency, which is in this standard we compare each of the laboratory, either private and government laboratory that they apply to extract the DNA and detections of porcine DNA. So we gather together and then we discuss what is the best, okay? Then we come up with one standard. And then I think the approach also applies to SMIC, which is now we are going to, inshallah, we will having, we developed the standard for SMIC for IC country. Okay, the scope of this standard is the adaptations and modification of method for qualitative detection of porcine DNA in food products. Okay, it's applicable to the raw material, processed and highly processed food using polymerase chain reaction approach. Okay, so okay, before that, as usual, before this, I explain what is the my department of chemistry, and then actually, Department of Chemistry in developing has contribute the ideas and the method in developing the Malaysian standard. Okay, this is the state like yesterday's. Okay, in the Malaysian standard, what we apply is we receive the sample first, and then we do extraction. Okay, in the test, in the standard method, we have decided to choose CTAP method as the best approach, which is the extraction buffer is available. Because why? When we have a discussion in terms of selecting the appropriate, the best extraction method, there are some other laboratory use kit, some other laboratory use conventional. So after discussion, we find out that CTAP extraction method was the best extraction method to extract the DNA from the food sample. So we do the extraction, and then we do, after that, the second step was electrophoresis gel. Okay, which is this one. In electrophoresis gel, we use TBE, and then you run using the cathode anode. Okay. Actually, after the extraction, we have to measure our DNA. We want to ensure how many amount of our DNA and the purity. Actually, we measure using spectrophotometer, and then before we go to electrophoresis, actually we run the polymerase chain reaction. Okay, PCR for this one. Okay, for in the standard, we have run for cytochrome B genes, and also that's one for screening. For double confirmation, either the porcine DNA was present in the food sample, we double confirm with the specific primer for porcines. Okay, after that, we go for, we run the jet electrophoresis. Okay, what we apply in our standard is Malaysia standard. Beside running PCR to double confirm, either the food really have the DNA porcine, we proceed to the real-time PCR. For the real-time PCR, we use the TechMan probe, which is patented by the Applied Biosystem. Okay, because when we are dealing with the halal things, you know, it's not that easy when we just stop at one step like PCR. So to double it, confirm either the sample really have the porcine DNA, we proceed to the real time PCR. After that, we go for reporting. Okay. Okay, this is the method that we choose to adopt in our Malaysian standard. First, we weigh 100 milligram plus minus 2 milligram of samples, and then we add 1 ml of CTAP lysis buffer. This one you can easily Google up in the through the internet, and then you can buy. And then we just add 20 microliter of Pro-K, then we vortex plus 5 microliter of RNase. Okay, then we vortex again. Okay, so the important step was incubation. After you add all these things, you must incubate at least 60 degrees for 50 minutes. Okay, during the incubation, we use a thermoshaker because why? We want to ensure all the reagent in the step 1 that we put in the tube was even. Okay, that's why we put in the thermoshaker. After that, we cool at after 50 minutes, we cool the tube that we put sample with the buffer. We cool at for room temperature for 5 minutes. After that, we centrifuge 30,000 RPM for 10 minutes. Okay. For the second step, centrifuge at 30 RPM was important because why? During this time, all your sample was lysis, and then the important element like your DNA was there. So that's why we have to centrifuge at 30 RPM so that it can be two separated layer. Okay. During our experiment, we try 10,000 RPM. So the yield is not very good. So the highest RPM is better. You get the better separation. Okay, after that, you just take 600 microliter of the supernatant from the centrifuge and then transfer to new tube. Okay, this for the step 3, we add 600 microliter of chloroform, vortex, and again, but this time we slow down the RPM, but in a longer time. Okay, because we know that chloroform will evaporate. Okay, so after we centrifuge, we transfer the aqueous layer in a new tube of 1.5 ml tube. Then we put again 100 microliter of chloroform and again centrifuge. So why, if you see step 1, step 2, step 1 and step 3, after we put a lysis buffer chloroform, you must centrifuge, but then please don't centrifuge vigorously, just a gentle to ensure that all the reagent that we put in the tube was evens. Okay, so for the step 4, centrifuge again at 600 RPM for 50 minutes, and then we repeat again the step a few times until we get a very clear layer. Okay, after we get the clear layer, we transfer 50 microliter of to 500 microliter. From the 500 microliter upper layer that we get, we only transfer 50 microliter to a new tube. And then after that, after you transfer 50 microliter, means that you already get your pure DNA extracted matter. Okay, actually, in Malaysia, in the standard that we develop, we decide to take the conventional method because, as you know, that kit is very expensive. Sometimes, some of the lab cannot buy because of the expensive. So we decide to take the conventional methods. Okay, so this is the jet electrophoresis. As you say, before that, this is the spectrophotometer. I think maybe other lab they use nanodraw. It depends. Okay, so when we run the gels, our base pair is 171 base pair for the porcine's DNA. So if the positive sample will come out like this, you will say we see one sharp band. Okay. Okay, for the PCR, okay, I think for cytochrome-BG, you can just Google up and any paper they will give you because cytochrome-BG was for universal vertebrate. But for porcine, sometimes you before this, my lab was used around 200 base pair. But after we do investigations, validation, we find very small base pair of the porcine. I think maybe Adelaide is more smaller than us. Okay, so this is the primer that we use for porcine. This one very specific for porcines only. Okay, so our worksheet, I mean before you put your samples in the machine, this is the template. This one all I extracted out from Malaysia standard. So we use 50 nanograms of DNA template, forward, reverse, as usual, 10 picomole, the primers, okay? And then master mix, 2 times. I think master mix, you can go any master mix that available in the markets, okay? But for us, we mostly we use Promega, Gotec, we use Premix, we use Red Mix, okay? So final concentrations, final volumes of the PCR product was 25 microliter. Okay, so in our standard method for Malaysia, the limit detection was 0.001 nanogram of POX DNA that can be detected by the PCR system that we developed. Okay, this is the conditions of the PCR for porcines. Okay, you can see there. I think it's quite similar to others, but that is depend to your primer, the length of your primer also. Okay, this is the real time. Okay, for real-time PCR, as I said, we decide in the standard method if anybody have, we don't mention that you have to stick for one master mate, because why? Just like my lab, we use ABI, we patent by ABI, but maybe other lab use another kit. Okay, so that in the Malaysian standard, we decide any lab can use their validated and accredited real-time PCR. Okay, so this one I extract out from the from our method. Okay, this is the condition for real-time PCR. This one is to double confirm, because why? The result will come up in the city value number. Okay. For real time, we adopt in the 2627, we apply Soichi Tanabe et al. 2007. So this is the reference, so you can Google up. Over there, you can find the porcine, beef, chicken, and a few animals. Okay, so the LOD for the real time was 0.01%, and then even though you see here the real time PCR cycle was 45, but after we do reproducibility, we find out most of the process sample, highly processed sample, the CT value come out before 40. So we decide any result that come out after 40, we conclude as a negative. And we only accept result that come out before 40s. Okay, so this is the result for the real-time PCR. Okay, so to develop this standard, we do reproducibility, LOD, sensitivity, LOD and also selectivity to ensure that the primer that we use really specific for porcine only, not sharing with the cow or any animals. Okay, so thank you. That's end of my presentation. So can we continue to the video?
Yes, please.
I've been mentioned that my video already sent to the committee.
Yes. Okay. Let me check that we have your video. Not.
Because because why my video have a song. So I will mention that the video that I sent to you been the song was removed. So I think it's more appropriate compared my video have a song.
Achha, okay. So your video, I think, is in downloading, so it will take 1 or 2 minutes. So just hold till that. But I think anyone from participant side have any question to ask regarding the procedure. I think she has nicely explained each and every step of detecting the DNA, because initially she has mentioned that it's a Malaysian standard, and I think you all need to learn that sometimes the different standards follow the different protocol. Although the target molecule is same, but as they follow the different standards, that's why their procedure is different and the protocol is different. Over. कौन सी वीडियो? अच्छा टाइमलाइन, ओके। हाँ, उसमें वो मैं इसलिए अवॉइड कर रहा हूँ क्योंकि ये लोग मुझे कुछ कम कर देंगे, तो उसमें ज़्यादा लंबी डिस्कशन करेंगे। जो अच्छी वाली ये जो थर्ड वाली हाँ ये अच्छा ओके. So now we are going to open your video. File save video. शायद. Is this your video?
Please, I can see here.
Okay, okay. Let us share screen with you. Is this yours video?
Yeah.
We would love your song as well. It's absolutely no problem. You can explain it.
Okay, we put the lysis buffers in it, and then centrifuge. Okay, this is we put the samples in the thermomixer. Okay, for 50 minutes. So you no need to count every 5 minutes and shake and inverts the tube. Okay.
Someone who you see is night.
Okay, after that, we centrifuge.
You feel so helpless, you can't see which way to go. Don't despair and never lose hope, 'cause Allah is always by your side. Inshallah, 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 you'll find your way. Inshallah, 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 you'll find your way. Every time you commit one more mistake, you feel you can't repent and that it's way too late. You're so confused, wrong decisions you have made. Haunt your mind and your heart is full of shame. Don't despair and never lose hope, 'cause Allah is always by your side. Inshallah, 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 you'll find your way. Inshallah, 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 you'll find your way.
Then we run for 100 volts.
Turn to Allah, He's never far away. Put your trust in Him, raise your hands and pray. Ooh, yeah, Allah, guide my steps, don't let me go astray. You're the only one who can show me the way. Show me the way. Show me the way. Show me the way.
Thus, we confirm the DNA.
Yes, Dr. Durrani, I mean, thank you very much for indeed a very wonderful explanation followed by interesting video with an excellent song. And I think after that presentation, I can see the people are quite fresh and happy and feel relaxed, you know. Just kidding. But, you know, especially after lunchtime with video, with song, and such a nice song really energize all of us. So indeed a good choice. And, yeah.
Song was removed. I was told that the song was removed. I don't know. It's still there.
Some accidents are happen to be happen, you know. So anyways, so any question from the audience side? I particularly would request Dr. Shakil to comment on the procedure because he is involved in testing DNA with different, you know, the approaches, including PCR and next generation sequence. So, Dr. Shakil, what do you think that, I mean, like the detecting of DNA with different protocols and methodology in various countries? So, is that okay, or are they quite reproducible? I need your comment on that.
Thank you, sir, for giving me the opportunity.
Please
Right,
speak loudly and close it.
I think the methods which the presenters are presenting here are quite reproducible. But I think the thing which is lacking is I have noted in this procedure, what is the quantity of starting material which and second, what amount of DNA is being extracted? Suppose if you are using 1 gram of food sample, so what is the amount of DNA after this process?
So, question is it clear to you? I mean, he asked about the amount of sample taken in that study and the recovery of DNA, how much DNA you extracted from that amount.
Okay. For everybody information, extraction method is the most important thing when you're doing the molecular benchwork. Even though you have very expensive, very modern instrument, but if your extraction method was fair, you cannot detect your DNA. So for the starting material is important. For examples like in our practice, for raw, we just only use 2 gram because the DNA that contained in a raw sample very high, a lot of DNAs compared to processed sample or highly processed sample. Normally, for highly processed sample, our starting material is different. For example, like gelatin, gelatin-based product, we use 2 gram, okay, 2 gram of samples. For oil samples like cooking oil, we use 30 mils of samples. So each of the samples is different. Normally for the powder form or the chocolate, we use 2 gram and more. Okay, for the recovery of the DNA, it depends. Sometimes we only accept the yields of DNA more than 100 nanogram. Okay, more than 100 nanogram, and then we diluted to the normally 50 nanogram, because it depends to your PCR and real-time PCR capability to detect the lowest of DNA. Normally our practice more than 100 nanogram per microliter of extracted product purity, the yields, then we accept. Below than that, normally we do troubleshooting. We re-extract against the sample. Might be we increase the starting volume of products.
Okay. So I think if someone is performing DNA isolation and the total yield is less than which is required, the amount we can also use DNA extraction. Important part in PCR studies or molecular biology studies. My next comment is regarding the quantitative PCR test. So, have you ever checked the stability of the probe which is being used in qPCR reaction? Because as I have experienced, in the qPCR reaction above the cycles of 35, the probe hydrolyzes and it gives false results. So have you ever witnessed this phenomena in your protocol or not?
So is this question, question, is it clear to you or do I need to repeat it?
Repeat it because the voice ups and down.
Actually, he is asking about the qPCR process, the quantitative estimation of PCR, where we use a probe. And he's asking about the stability of probe, because every after 35 scan, sometime it gives a false positive result. So what about your experience on that? Am I okay? Dr. Shakil, that what was
Yes,
asking?
exactly.
Okay.
Okay. First of all, in our lab, we don't use, our approach is qualitative. Qualitative meaning detectors or not detected. We don't, our approach not quantitative. But I just share, correct me if I'm wrong, for quantitative, normally what we apply for GMO, for bacteria, in our lab, we use Techman probe, which is the MGB. I think for probe hybridization, is it for cyber green? If the cyber green, before this, yes, we experience when we doing for bacteria detections of bacteria. Yes, sometimes it give you a false positive. So what we do is for the probe, because very sensitive, we have running reproducibility. We run reproducibility and we see the range, the bell curve, the range that the correct curve that the system will give you. But for POSA, we don't do quantitative, we just only qualitative.
Okay. So once again, Sister, thank you very much for your time and wonderful lecture and nicely explanation the whole procedure. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So now we have third video. अच्छा अच्छा अभी डाउनलोड हो रही है ये जो अभी लिंक भेजा है उसकी उससे अच्छा okay. So now the third and last presentation from Thailand. But unfortunately, we have their video presentation, but the presenter is not around due to some urgent meeting in their center. So somehow we can show their videos, and I hope that it would be clear too, because it's subtitled with English, so it would be clear. But the meanwhile, it's being downloaded, so we can discuss some other important issue, because although we're supposed to discuss in the conclusion ceremony, but now we have a time, so we can discuss, because it's important to send or conclude the forum like this with some important recommendation and suggestion to the higher authorities. Okay, and for that we need a contribution from each one of you. You may write, you have a pad with you, so just write in next 5 minutes whatever the recommendations have in your mind. Please feel free to write. It's up to you whether you can name your page or not. So it's not necessary that you name a suggestion with you, but definitely want to have some suggestion, recommendation from all of you. And also, if you have any questions who have not been addressed yet, please feel free to write on your pad and give it to us, to me, or to Hasib, or to Haris. Okay, because tomorrow we are planning to compile, and we try to present or maybe to give to the higher authority, so then they can look and maybe they can forward to the concerned authorities at the national level, international level as well. And the same request I would from all those participants who are participating through online. So please feel free to write us your recommendation, suggestion. You can email your suggestion to the email address that we have provided to Mr. Haris, or you can also, write in a chat box with the heading that a recommendation or suggestion, something like this. So it would be useful to all of us. Yes, now we have a video from Thailand.
Assalam.
Okay. Huh? Okay. Here we go. Whatever you.
อะลัยกุมวะเราะห์มะตุลลอฮิวะบะเราะกาตุฮ์สวัสดีค่ะการตรวจ DNA สุกรหรือสารพันธุกรรมสุกรในผลิตภัณฑ์อาหารนะคะโดยใช้เครื่อง real time PCR ในการวิเคราะห์ตรวจหาปริมาณการปนเปื้อน DNA ในผลิตภัณฑ์อาหารผลิตภัณฑ์ส่วนใหญ่ที่นำมาตรวจวิเคราะห์ในทางด้าน lab DNA นะคะจะเป็นผลิตภัณฑ์ที่แปรรูปจากเนื้อสัตว์ยกตัวอย่างเช่นไส้กรอกลูกชิ้นพิซซ่าแฮมเบอร์เกอร์ต่างๆนะคะขั้นตอนแรกในการนำตัวอย่างมาทดสอบการปนเปื้อน DNA สุกรในอาหารโดยการนำตัวอย่างมาบดและนำมาชั่งในปริมาณ10 ถึง 15 มิลลิกรัมจากนั้นนำตัวอย่างมาเติมนิวคลีไอไลซีดและนำมาบดด้วยแท่งบดพลาสติกเพื่อให้DNA หรือว่าเซลล์ของผลิตภัณฑ์อาหารนะคะแตกออกจากนั้นมาบ่มที่อุณหภูมิ65 องศาเซลเซียสเป็นเวลา15 นาทีเมื่อเสร็จจากการบ่มแล้วจะนำมาเติมโปรตีน SK นะคะเป็นการย่อยโปรตีนนำมาบ่มที่อุณหภูมิ55 องศาเซลเซียสเป็นเวลา3 ชั่วโมงนะคะจากนั้นนำมาเติม RNS เพื่อย่อย RNA นะคะเป็นเวลา15 นาทีที่อุณหภูมิ37 องศาเซลเซียสจากนั้นนำสารที่ได้มาเติมโปรตีน precipitation และนำมาเซนทริฟิวเพื่อให้โปรตีนที่เราย่อยในขั้นตอนแรกอะค่ะมาตกตะกอนจากนั้นนะคะนำสารที่ได้ส่วนใสที่ได้จากการตกตะกอนนะคะมาดูดแล้วก็ใส่ในหลอดใหม่แล้วก็มาเติมไอโอโซโพรพานอนเพื่อให้สารละลาย DNA ค่ะละลายหรือว่าฟอร์มตัวเป็น DNA ในไอโซโพรพานอนจากนั้นนะคะนำมาเซนทริฟิวเพื่อให้ DNA ที่เราสกัดได้ค่ะตกตะกอนและนำมาเติมด้วยเอทานอล 70% เพื่อให้ DNA สะอาดหรือเป็นขั้นตอนในการล้าง DNA นะคะจากนั้นเมื่อเราล้าง DNA เสร็จเราก็จะระเหยแอลกอฮอล์ที่เราเติมลงไปนะคะเป็นเวลา10 นาทีเมื่อเราระเหยแอลกอฮอล์เสร็จแล้วนะคะเราจะมาเติม DNA rehydration เพื่อเป็นการเก็บรักษา DNA ที่เราสกัดได้ในขั้นตอนแรกอะค่ะจากนั้นนะคะเมื่อเราได้สารละลาย DNA ที่ละลายอยู่ในสาร DNA rehydration แล้วเราจะนำ DNA อันนี้นะคะมาทดสอบว่ามีความบริสุทธิ์หรือมีความเข้มข้นของ DNA เท่าไหร่โดยการนำมาเข้าเครื่องนาโนดอปเพื่อจะวัดปริมาณหรือความเข้มข้นของ DNA นะคะจากนั้นนะคะเราจะนำ DNA ตัวนี้ที่เราสกัดได้ค่ะมาเตรียมโดยใช้มัสเตอร์มิกหรือเป็นสารที่จำเพาะต่อ DNA ที่เราสกัดมาโดยน้ำยาที่ใช้นะคะก็จะมีด้วยกัน4อย่างก็คือจะมีน้ำบริสุทธิ์อันนี้ขั้นตอนนี้เรียกว่าการทำ PCR นะคะโดยการนำน้ำไซเบอร์กรีนแล้วก็ไพรเมอร์2ตัวก็คือ forward primer และ reverse primer นะคะนำมาละลายในหลอดทดลองหรือไมโครทิวนะคะจากนั้นเราก็เอาสารละลายที่เราผสมกันนะคะมาใส่ใน96 well plate ขั้นตอนต่อไปก็ใส่ตามจำนวนที่เราวิเคราะห์อย่างเช่นเรามีตัวอย่าง10ตัวแล้วก็ใส่10หลุมและมีคอนโทรลในการเปรียบเทียบ2คอนโทรลก็คือเป็น negative control เราจะใช้น้ำหรือสารละลายอะไรก็ได้ที่ไม่มี DNA อยู่ในนั้นนะคะจากนั้นเราก็จะใช้ positive control อันนี้จะเป็น DNA หมูที่เราสกัดจากเนื้อหมูโดยตรงมาเป็นคอนโทรลเปรียบเทียบเมื่อเราได้สารผสมจากสาร4ตัวที่เราผสมลงไปนะคะเรามาเติมใน96 well plate แล้วเราก็เติมตัวอย่างหรือ DNA ที่เราสกัดมาได้ค่ะลงไปในสารละลายผสมอันนี้ขั้นตอนต่อไปนะคะจะเป็นการนำสารละลายที่เราผสมกับตัวอย่าง DNA ของเราเข้าเครื่อง real time PCR เครื่องนี้นะคะจะทำงานใช้เวลาชั่วโมงครึ่งโดยจะมีด้วยกัน4ขั้นตอนขั้นตอนแรกคือการเพิ่มอุณหภูมิให้ถึง95องศาเซลเซียสเพื่อให้ DNA ที่เป็นสายคู่ค่ะแยกเป็นสายเดี่ยวจากนั้นเราจะลดอุณหภูมิลงเพื่อที่จะให้เอนไซม์ที่จำเพาะต่อ DNA นะคะมาจับโดยการสังเคราะห์สาย DNA จาก DNA ไพรเมอร์ที่เราผสมลงไปในสารละลายตอนแรกนะคะแล้วก็จะจำลอง DNA สายใหม่แล้วก็จะมีการเพิ่มจำนวน DNA โดยใช้ไซเบอร์กรีนหรือว่าฟลูออโรโคมเป็นการดีเทคผลที่เราได้อะค่ะอย่างเช่นตัวอย่างที่มีการปนเปื้อนหมูก็จะขึ้นพีคปรากฏชัดเจนถ้าตัวอย่างไหนที่ไม่มีการปนเปื้อนหมูก็จะเป็นเส้นกราฟที่เรียบค่ะและนี่ก็เป็นการตรวจหาปริมาณ DNA สุกรที่ปนเปื้อนในผลิตภัณฑ์อาหารแปรรูปจากเนื้อสัตว์นะคะโดยใช้เครื่อง real time PCR ในการตรวจวิเคราะห์ค่ะอัสสลามุอะลัยกุมวะเราะห์มะตุลลอฮิวะบะเราะกาตุฮ์สวัสดีค่ะการตรวจ
So thank you very much from our Thai partner for showing their protocol for the DNA detection. You have noticed that all three videos are related to DNA. But you know why we have selected a single method from different countries, just to give you a glimpses and an in-depth view of a test which you may be able to perform in your center. Because as far as the halal concerned, the most common test worldwide used is nothing but DNA testing, DNA-based testing of porcine and its related work. So that's why it's more important to know at first, at least, the more in-depth knowledge of DNA testing protocol. And during this practical demonstration that I'm sure that you have noticed that the differences and commonalities of a method that is being offered by Turkey, Thailand, and Indonesia or Malaysia. Okay. So now you can see that these three methods, technically they are same, but sometimes the processing is different or the protocols a bit different. But otherwise, these are the most common protocols that are widely being practiced for the DNA detection. So today's session is over now. That's all we have for the practical demonstration. Tomorrow you would have a different view of Halal laboratory. It's more related to accreditation. It's more related to the Sharia aspect of Halal laboratory, that why you need to have Islamic component whenever you are going to analyze the things. Remember that the day one, Dr. Dilan has mentioned that after the analysis, the decision needs to be taken in the light of Sharia concept, So that's what we are going to talk about tomorrow morning, followed by, the Ji. Yes, so this is all about today's. So as I have discussed that we need to have your suggestion and advice in return. So I hope that you can all quickly do that because we are voting for that. So if you can just do that, raise your hand so these 2% can collect. Okay, ये जो जिनका जिनका हो गया उनसे collect कर लें. But if any one of you would like to advise or suggest something, just let me know so we can discuss that as well. ये अली, आप और वो ज़रा जो लोगों से कलेक्ट कर लें क्विकली, ले रहे हैं ये? अच्छा अच्छा. Yes. Please raise your hand if you have completed so they can quickly identify and collect. Actually, a lot of people are asking about the presentation, including those who are attending online. So what we will do after completion of things, I think the presentation would be available through Comstack website. Yes, so they will share a link with the participants so you can download all these presentation. Okay, yes. Mm, 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 mm. And I'm sure that you have noticed we are following the whole program quite accurately. We start on time or end on time. So please make sure that all of you be there tomorrow on time so we can start the program on time. So I think almost everyone has uh, given their recommendations, suggestions. So thank you very much for all of you. I think tea would be ready next 5 minutes. So the session is officially closed. Thank you very much.
सर क्लोज कर दूं सब?
1 मिनट वेट कर लें, चैट हमने सेव करनी है, उसके बाद कीजिएगा.
इट्स ओके.
जी सेशन एंड कर दें अब आप। जुनेद सेशन एंड कर दें अब।